But I'd rung 999 on the way because I obviously knew something was wrong. So the police rang me then while I was at the bench and said, look, you've got to get home because the police are going to be coming to your house. We need somebody at your house. You get home, the police are on the way there. So I'd rung the police at like, I think about 10 to 11, and they were there, like they got there at 25 past. So they were there, you know, really, really quick.
Then and did you examine the mobile phone and did you make any calls?
So she actually saw the dog tied up at the bench facing her as she come through the metal gate, and it was tied up with some yellow baling string, and there was a phone on the bench with a dog harness. She said it was a blue one, she thinks.
The coroner wanted to know, was the phone active? Was it working?
She replied, no. She picked the phone up but couldn't get it into it because it had a lock. But when it lit up, it showed Paul's family and his children.
So you recognise the picture of the people?
And she replied that she didn't know them, but Roger knew who it was, but we didn't know where they lived or anything.
Okay, so your husband recognised?
And she replied, yes, he recognised PA.
Yeah, so what did you do after that, please?
So she said that she picked the phone up to try and find out the owner of the phone, but couldn't get into it. So she thought she put the dog harness back on the dog because she didn't know that anyone had gone missing at that point, and she thought she'd take it for a walk down allotment lane to the garage where her friend works to see if she could identify whose dog it was. Because she works facing the main road, there's always people walking past, so she thought that because of that her friend might be able to recognise who it belonged to.
And did you find out who the dog belonged to? The coroner asked.
And then she replied that they got halfway down allotment lane and bumped into AMF, that's PF's daughter-in-law. She was coming out the drive and she just come up to her and asked her if that's the dog. So she assumed that she already knew about what's going on.
And then the coroner's asking, okay, so run it past me again. Who came out and who said it's that dog?
And she replied, AMF, that's PF's daughter-in-law.
So the daughter-in-law. So what happened next? And what did you say to AMF?
She replied that she showed her the phone and the picture on the front, and AMF said she knows who that is, and she rang the school.
So Dr. Oakley says it. So I believe she says she knew who that is, and that's Nikki.
She replied that yes, because her children go to the same school as Nikki's.
And then Susan said that she spoke to someone at school and she got through. And then Dr. Oakley asked, "What happened then? Did you get a call back?"
Then she replied that AMF was dealing with it. She wasn't sure whether she phoned PA, but she was on the phone to someone, and when she come off the phone, she turned round and said that she's struggling.
Okay, in your witness statement, what you say is that you showed AMF a picture on your phone, on the phone, and she says, "I know who that is. That's Nicola," said AMF, called the local school straight away, and so that they could contact her partner, who's PA. And she talked to Mrs. Green. Who is Mrs. Green, please?
And she replied that she didn't know. She's the secretary or the headmistress. She didn't know who this Mrs. Green was at the school.
And then after she spoke to the call, AMF, after you called the school rang AMF back to say that PA was on his way. Does that sound the right way it happened?
Yes, that sounds right.
And then at one point, AMF was on a fourth phone call to PA. When she came off the phone, AMF said that PA had said she was struggling.
Jay replied that she was assuming it was PA that she was talking to, but because she's hard of hearing, she couldn't hear it.
Okay, and then the coroner just said he believes that PA arrived shortly after that. Did he?
About 10 minutes after the phone call, AMF actually took the dog off her by that point when they bumped into him, and she started walking back down Allotment Lane and took the dog back up the wooded area, and they all followed.
And Dr. Oakley thanks her. Is there anything further that you think I should have needed to ask, but I haven't?
And it said that when she picked the harness up to put it on Willow, which Willow was okay with, they fastened it. She undid the twine off on the bench, and they started to walk off, but the dog wouldn't move. And she realised when the dog turned round that on the left-hand side facing her there was a retractable lead hanging, so they used that to walk the dog, and then she just moved no problem.
And the coroner says, "Oh, sorry, so where was the retractable lead?"
She replied it was clipped onto the top of the harness, but it was hanging down the left side. Where she was looking at the dog, she couldn't see it, but when the dog turned, so the left-hand side of Willow was facing her, that's when she realised that the lead was attached to the harness.
And then the coroner just reiterates that basically, yeah, you noticed the retractable lead was hanging from the harness. Then after you attach the harness to the dog,
and she replied, yeah, but it was all closed up. So it wasn't, the lead wasn't out the retractable harness. The harness was closed right to the end.
Over to Miss Cartwright, so I'll be Miss Cartwright too. So she just thank you for confirming that the lead was attached to the harness. Are you able to assist us at all? I've told us that you went to the bench at the time, and your husband was there. Can you recall where the dog harness was when you got to the area by the bench?
And she just said that the dog lead was attached to the harness, but she hadn't spotted it when she put it on the dog at the time.
And do you recall the whereabouts of the dog harness? Was it on the bench?
And she said, yes, it was on the bench next to the phone.
Miss Cartwright then goes on to ask, I can see you mentioned the time when PA arrived. Do you remember when PA was handed the phone, him saying something to the effect that the phone was still connected to a Zoom call?
She recalls that when she passed him the phone, she told him there was 3 messages on it or something, and he knew the password and unlocked it.
I can probably take this. I am satisfied that, as Becky has described, following the initial report of Nicola as being missing to Lancashire Police, immediately she was graded as high risk. That in itself is a significant level of risk that does bring with it focused attention and significant resources. So I'm satisfied that, given there was no evidence of any crime having occurred at that first point of the report, yes, it was handled appropriately, but as the days began to progress, as would be normal with any high-risk missing person investigation, who hadn't turned up, hadn't been found by Monday.
So any sightings around that time will be useful via 101.
I gather her mobile phone was found on a bench nearby.
That's correct, yeah. About an hour later we found both her dog and her mobile phone on the bench.
How do you think she got to St Michael's? Because her home is probably 3 miles away, is it?
I'm not aware of how she got from her home area to the village, but we believe she made on foot with the dog to the tow.
And 3 days on, how concerned are you?
Well, clearly as time goes on, naturally we become more and more concerned. We've done a really extensive search of the riverbank area, the towpath, the surrounding area. Spoken to lots of local people who have come out in droves to try and help find Nicola, which is really kind of them. It is a close-knit community, but clearly as time goes on we are becoming more concerned for safety and more doing to try and find her. Thank you.
Of a senior investigating officer with all the investigation infrastructure that comes with that.
May have contributed to the situation. So, was she ill, or was she taking any medication, or underlying conditions?
We're not considering. We've clearly considered the whole picture, but that is not relevant at this time. No, not at all.